My sister said, "Why would we invite her? She's just a useless accountant." And everyone at the table laughed, not knowing I was the one secretly funding the entire business. They thought I wouldn't find out. They thought leaving me out of the meeting meant they had won. They didn't know I'd already changed everything behind their backs. And when they find out, it'll be too late. Like, share, and subscribe if you love revenge with a twist. This story will blow your mind. I was never their favorite. In a family of loud businessmen and overconfident egos, I was the quiet one. The number girl, always stuck with spreadsheets and receipts. They never saw the long nights I spent fixing their messes, cleaning up financial disasters they caused, in silence. And when our family company started gaining success, they made sure to keep me in the shadows. No credit, no appreciation. Just work, work, and more work. 2 weeks ago, they held a private business strategy meeting. I only found out because the caterer accidentally sent the menu to my email, a menu I paid for, by the way. When I asked my brother about it, he didn't even flinch. "You don't need to be there. It's for decision makers only." Decision makers? The irony. They wouldn't even have decisions to make if it wasn't for me restructuring the accounts 2 years ago. But I said nothing. I smiled. I stayed quiet. What they didn't know was that I'd already been working behind the scenes. See, they gave me access, full control over company finances, thinking I was too loyal to ever use it. But after years of disrespect, I had started creating backups, tracking shady transactions, even building quiet ownership under a shell company they didn't know was mine. All legally. Last Friday, while they toasted champagne at the exclusive boardroom meeting, discussing expansion, money, power, I received a message from our bank's regional manager. Just 6 words. "Ownership transfer successful. You now control majority." And I smiled, because while they were busy laughing, I became the person who signs their paychecks. My brother raised his glass and said, "To the future of the company." Without the dead weight. And they all laughed, not realizing that every glass in that room was paid for with my money. I watched the meeting from the security feed. Yes, I had installed cameras when they asked me to upgrade the office systems. I zoomed in on their faces, the way they talked about me like I was a burden. "She's too soft for this business," my uncle said. "Always emotional. No instinct." Emotional? Maybe. But not stupid. And definitely not weak. They thought removing me meant more power for them. What they didn't know was that I'd been planning this for 2 years. I had slowly started redirecting investments under a holding company I built quietly. One they'd never bothered to look into because, well, they assumed I couldn't even spell strategy. Every deal they signed had my fingerprints on it. Every investor they bragged about at dinner parties, referred by me, approved by me, funded by me. That same night, I sent out an emergency shareholders notice, a legal right they didn't know I had. The subject line? Urgent, change of ownership, immediate board meeting required. The next morning, chaos. My phone rang 15 times. First my brother, then my cousin, then my mother, asking what I had done. I ignored all of them. I wanted them to sweat. I wanted them to panic. Because for once, I wasn't the one waiting outside the room. They were. And then came the biggest twist, the one that would crush their egos forever. While they scrambled to figure out what was going on, the family lawyer, yes, my lawyer, walked into the office with the documents. I had rewritten the voting structure. The company's control, transferred. My share, now the majority. Their access, frozen. They stood there, eyes wide, mouths open, and I just said one sentence. "You should have invited me to the meeting." My uncle stepped forward, face red, voice shaking. "This is a joke, right? You think you can walk in here and take what we built?" I didn't even look at him. I just opened my bag, pulled out the thick stack of signed legal documents, and placed them gently on the glass table. "It's not a joke," I said calmly. "It's math. Something none of you ever respected, until it bit you." They all stared at the papers. My brother snatched one and skimmed through it like it would magically change. My cousin muttered, "No. No way. This isn't legal. This isn't possible." But it was. I had studied every loophole in our company's outdated structure. I had consulted with 3 separate legal teams, none of whom had any ties to the family. All silent, all strategic, all preparing for this day. My mother finally spoke. "Why would you do this to your own family?" I looked her in the eyes. "Family? You mean the same people who held meetings behind my back, mocked my work, and used my name only when it benefited them on tax forms?" She looked away. "You see, they never realize that the quiet one sees everything. They underestimated the girl who stayed home doing taxes while they were out cutting deals and playing golf. They didn't know I was the one who saved the company from collapse 3 years ago when my cousin lost $600,000 in a failed crypto scam. I cleaned it up. I covered it. And they never even thanked me. But the final straw? Last year, my brother took out a business loan in the company's name without consulting anyone, not even me. When I questioned it, he laughed and said, "You just move the numbers around. Let the men handle the real stuff." That night, I decided I wouldn't just leave. I would take everything. I had converted my quiet loyalty into legal power. The business bank accounts, frozen under my authority. The property titles, quietly shifted. Even the vendor contracts, all restructured under my personal holding firm. I didn't just take control of the company. I became the company. My cousin, now panicked, looked at me and said, "But what about us? We built this with you." I turned slowly and replied, "You built this with my spreadsheets, my calculations, and my silence. And now, I'm done being silent." They still didn't believe it. So I showed them the final proof, a live dashboard on my laptop. All funds, all shares, all ownership certificates. And then I dropped the final blow. "I'm restructuring the board. Effective immediately. You're all being relieved of your positions." Gasps. Outrage. My uncle started yelling. My brother slammed his fist on the table. I stood up slowly and said, "If you touch me or raise your voice, I will file charges for financial manipulation, fraud, and illegal use of company funds. All of which I have documented. Don't test me." Silence. That's when the lawyer, still standing by the door, handed each of them an envelope. "These are your termination packages," he said flatly. "Generous, considering the damage you've done." I walked out without looking back. But just before I stepped into the elevator, I turned and said, "Oh, and the next board meeting? I'll make sure you get an invite. Front row." The doors closed, and I smiled. 2 days later, the office was dead silent. No arrogant laughter. No ego-filled shouting matches. Just the soft hum of keyboards and respect. Real, quiet, earned respect. I walked in wearing the same plain clothes they used to mock. No designer bag, no flashy jewelry, just confidence. The kind they could never buy. Every employee I passed gave me a look, not of pity anymore, but of quiet admiration. They had heard. Everyone had heard. One of the junior accountants stood up when I passed by his desk. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, We always knew you were the real brain here. Thank you for what you did." I just nodded. "Get back to work. We're building something better now." But just as I reached my new office, the one my brother used to keep locked, the receptionist came running in. "There's someone in the lobby? He says it's urgent." I frowned. "Who?" "Your ex." My heart skipped. A twist I didn't expect. Ryan. The same man who once told me I wasn't ambitious enough for his future. Who dumped me at a networking dinner because I didn't dress like a CEO's wife. That Ryan. I walked down to the lobby slowly, not sure whether I felt anger or amusement or both. And there he was, standing there in a tight blazer, sunglasses still on indoors, fake confidence dripping off him. He smiled. "Wow, so the rumors were true. You really did take the whole company?" I crossed my arms. "Why are you here, Ryan?" He gave a fake chuckle. "I figured you might want to talk. Reconnect. We've both grown so much, you know? I always believed in you." I stared at him. No words. Just a long, cold look. He shifted awkwardly. "Look, I've got a few deals coming up. Maybe you and I could..." I cut him off. "The only deal I want is watching your face when you realize I'm richer, smarter, and far out of your league now." He froze. I leaned in slightly. "Remember when you said I was just a boring accountant? Turns out I now sign the checks. For the VC firm that rejected your pitch. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I turned around and walked away. One of my assistants came running with a schedule update. I took the file and said, loud enough for Rayon to hear, "Push back the investor call. I don't like rushing billion-dollar decisions." The assistant nodded, and I stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed again, I glanced back at Rayon, still standing there, broken. I whispered, just for myself. They all wanted to erase me, but I became unforgettable. It had been 3 months since I took control, and everything had changed. Not just in the office, but in me. I no longer walked with my head down, no longer waited to be invited, or hoped someone would recognize my worth. Now, they reported to me. Even the ones who once mocked me now waited outside my door for approval. The family tried everything. My uncle filed a legal appeal. It was laughed out of court. My cousin tried to rally the old clients, but they all stayed with me because I had always been the one holding the relationships together behind the scenes. My brother even offered to advise me for a small stake in the company. I didn't reply. I just forwarded his email to spam, where he belongs. But the most unexpected twist came at the company's annual gala, the same event they never once let me attend, not even as a guest. This time, I was the one on stage. Over 300 people in the crowd, investors, employees, media. My name written in bold letters on the banner, CEO and founder, Alina Holdings. As I stepped up to speak, the room fell silent. I looked out and saw faces filled with curiosity, doubt, admiration. And in the far back, my family, seated quietly, watching the one person they once dismissed now standing under the spotlight. They tried to keep for themselves. I took a deep breath and said, "A few years ago, I was told I wasn't leadership material, that I was too soft, too emotional, too small to lead." But here's what they didn't understand. Being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's a weapon. One that gives you silence to prepare. One that gives you time to build. The crowd clapped. Not politely, but with real emotion. I continued, my voice steady. They mocked me, excluded me. They thought shutting me out would stop me. But while they were busy playing kings, I paused. I became the one who owns the throne. The applause roared, echoing through the hall. After the event, people lined up to shake my hand. Young women came up with tears in their eyes, saying they finally believed they could fight back, that they didn't need to beg for seats at tables, they could buy themselves. But the most satisfying moment came later that night. A private dinner had been arranged. I didn't know by who, until I walked in. My mother stood up from the table. My uncle, brother, cousin, all there, seated, awkward, uncomfortable, for once, not in control. My mother spoke softly. "We were wrong, all of us. We didn't see what you were becoming." I looked around the table, the same people who once rolled their eyes when I spoke, who used to laugh when I made suggestions. Now they couldn't meet my gaze. I sat down slowly, folded my hands, and said, "What you didn't see wasn't the problem. What matters is that you never cared to look." They asked for forgiveness. They asked to come back into the company, even in minor roles. I gave them all the same answer. No. They looked shocked. I leaned in. "This isn't revenge," I said. "This is clarity. You taught me that family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands by you when there's nothing to gain. You all failed that test." I stood up. "The company will grow, with or without you. But from this moment on, your names will only live in its history, not its future." I walked out of that restaurant taller than ever before, because the girl they once ignored had become the woman they could never outrun, and that's how I went from invisible to unshakable.